Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ceres podcast. This is episode 245, and today I'm joined by Andrew Markou, CEO and co-founder of businessesforsale.com. Andrew has helped grow the business from a Birmingham-based magazine sales business, like a directory, into a global online marketplace, connecting business buyers, sellers, brokers and franchisors and franchisees, now drawing millions and millions of users a month. In this episode, we get right into what makes a hospitality business valuable, especially in fish and chips. We talk about why cash flow, not turnover, is the foundation of a strong valuation, what realistic multiples look like, how systems and structure lift the value of a business by reducing owner dependency. We also cover succession, what to change and what not to change after you purchase a business, and why franchising is growing in the UK. Plus, what independents can learn from having that franchise mindset. It's practical, trade-focused stuff with examples that will feel very familiar if you run a fish and chip shop. This episode is sponsored by Ceres Calculator. As this conversation went, it just kept circling back to cash flow. And even as I was talking to Andrew, I thought, you know what? The sponsor for this show should be the calculators, because we're always telling people, tighten up your numbers, look at this, look at that. And for me, this is where the Ceres calculators really come into play. They're free, so you'd be crazy not to use them. And you've got calculators like gross profit calculator, food cost to turnover calculator, labour cost percentage, energy as a percentage of turnover, chip yield loss. And then there's just so many more. There's probably about 18 different calculators, all free, all very simple to use. They help you track your margins and you build a business that runs on facts, not guesswork. And as always, the Ceres blog is dropping practical, fresh insight every day for you guys to run a stronger business. At Ceres, we believe that building a better industry starts with us having the tools at our fingertips, the right insights, the right products, the right stories to help you grow. We're here to survive, but also to thrive. Right, let's get into this with Andrew. Andrew, welcome to the Ceres podcast, mate.
Hello, Stelios.
So good to have you on.
Very welcome to have me. Also, you haven't heard what I've got to say yet, so you might not be thinking at the end of this conversation.
No, you know what? A lot of people say that, and then they're quite vanilla. So I'm hoping you're going to live up to that promise. I think one of the things when you do a podcast is like listeners are like, and I get it, and anyone listening to this is like, oh, I could go on that and say this, and I'll reach out and I'll be like, oh, do you fancy it then? Like, and they're like, oh, I don't know now. Like, and I think that the thought of talking about what you do for a living probably scares some people. But
yeah, it does. I think any performance does. Yeah. But the reality is if you're doing what you do day in, day out, it's probably a heck of a lot easier than you realise.
Well, and this is why I always say to people, if we're doing a round table or we're doing a normal podcast, I always put at the bottom of the email, I'll say something like, just think of it as two people in the same industry that ended up sitting on the same train together next to each other, and they started talking naturally. Because that is essentially what it is. Like, I'm just curious about what you do at businessesforsale.com, because, and that's not a plug, that's the name of the company. It sounds like a plug, but I guess the name, we'll talk about this earlier, but the nature of the name is a constant plug.
Yeah, it says what it does on the tin.
Yeah, exactly. It's the WD-40 of the selling businesses.
Yeah, Ron Seal.
Yeah. Actually, WD-40 doesn't say what it does on the tin. It's the opposite of WD-40.
Yeah.
So, but no, I think I always say to people, just chill out, just relax. Like, if you're next to me and I'm on the train, I'm going to say to you, how's business? What's interesting about your business? But I think we hype it up. We hype it up so much, and we panic. But I've done over 230 of these now, and I'm a natural talker anyway, so I don't have an issue with that. But what I'd like, initially, let's get us into businessesforsale.com, Andrew, and how it started, and then I'll do my thing.
Yeah, I think like all businesses, all good businesses, you hope are born of the need to address a problem, find a solution. So businessesforsale.com was a paper-based publication of Businesses for Sale, which was imaginatively called Businesses and Premises for Sale magazine, which was pre-internet. So we're talking in the 90s, and that was founded by my father, who's an accountant in Birmingham in the Midlands. He had a lot of ethnic client base, obviously a lot of Cypriots, a lot of food businesses, because they obviously run in areas of concentration of ethnicity. So a lot of Indian restaurants, a lot of catering businesses generally, which align with diasporas. So my father was involved with that, and he recognized, there's a bit of a succession issue here, i.e. passing ownership of one business owner to the next. And he thought, well, it would be a good idea to open that market up. So he started working within the client base, within the communities of his clients, of transferring businesses and helping assist, because he was an introducer effectively, say, well, I've got a business and actually my children don't want to take it on. Someone is interested in buying this, he'll make the introduction. So effectively a kind of honest broker, really. And a family member at the time and a family connection, Nick Pilley, helped establish the more wider ranging, further distributed publication of the magazine during the 90s, which did okay. It really went head to head with Dalton's Weekly, which was the incumbent media player at the time, which effectively had a bit of a monopoly on those types of businesses, SME, catering heavy businesses. And Dalton's was a really interesting publication because it was a bit of a ragtag publication of property, holidays, and then also businesses for sale at the back. And I think the logic there was that people would book a holiday, like a cottage in Devon, and think, this is actually quite a nice business. I'd like to buy a cottage that has B&B type facilities. And they would look at the back of Dalton's and think, okay, let's buy one. So what we did is, my dad, Nick, and my older brother, Marcus, who has editorial flair, having been a journalist and also now a filmmaker, that's another story. They got into the national distribution. This again, pre-internet. As part of that, the domain name businessesforsale.com was registered a long, long time ago, over 30 years ago, which was really originally done as an adjunct to the paper, not actually as a dedicated .com.
Oh, wow, okay.
So there's a genesis to this, like origin story, that is quite interesting in terms of it was old media, there was an existing problem, but old media tried to address it. Then I came on the scene, having done computer science at university. I'm wondering, well, surely this stuff's got to go online. There's this thing called the internet, guys, over here. And it was just a little, probably a little glint in the eye of Jeff Bezos at the time in the mid-90s. So we started thinking about seriously what it would take to get an online proposition going. So that's when that came into being. And some point in the late 90s, we decided to drop the paper and go all in online. Wow. Because, the benefits of doing something online versus offline are so huge, so much more scalable. And actually the cost economics of it could mean that you could get to cash flow positivity a heck of a lot quicker, which is ultimately the bedrock of all businesses' survival. Cash flow. Yeah. Cash flow is king, which we'll probably talk about later in terms of valuation and what makes a good business to buy in terms of its financial makeup. So, that's how we ended up in the late 90s, going all in online with the businessesforsale.com domain. And really back then, there was no kind of model on which to operate. This was before even Rightmove. So other kind of classifieds that exist today that we all take for granted, they weren't even around at the time. So, buying, selling a house was certainly not something you do online. Equally as well, buying a car. I think Auto Trader, to their credit, were really early adopters in terms of saying, well, paper is finite, but going online is seemingly infinite. So they did the amazing leap and managed from old media world to take it online. And so we just filled that space of businesses for sale. And one of the main things we did is we went global rather than just restrict it to the UK.
Yeah.
And there's reasons behind that, which are quite interesting.
Yeah. So one thing I'd like to pick up on is your dad, to us anyway, me growing up, wasn't just like, or at least your dad's business. I don't think, you just said he was an accountant. Like, to many of us lot though, like, it was the accountant. Like, I think he was the accountant before accountants, especially for Cypriots. I think he probably, whether he likes it or not, I think a lot of other accountants came up behind him.
Yes.
And I'd imagine he probably started when he started, and he was like one of the few, if not the only. And then when he probably retired, he like loads of them, like loads.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he had first mover advantage just
absolutely
by virtue of the circumstance of timing. But that need for business transfer, the fact that, you know, businesses have a life of their own beyond the owner, i.e. an asset that can be traded and sold on and monetized, valorized through a sale, which, you know, has tax advantages through capital gains, which I think at the last reading is still a little more advantageous to other forms of income. So, yeah, he recognised that quite quick. And, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, he set up shop in the early 70s, you know, and late 60s, actually. So a long, long time ago. And he only retired a few years back.
Yeah. And I guess then it's weird because then you guys also had first mover advantage too, because, you know, a few years later, obviously. But it's interesting because I think from my point of view, like, did you and your brothers ever consider taking over that business and getting into that? Or did you ever help or get involved with that? Or
my father had loved us to become accountants, but that wasn't in our destinies, me or not. Because, you know, accountancy is a certain profession, you know, and I guess if we were to go into that game, we probably would have gone to a bigger accountancy anyway in the first instance, which is a professionalized route into the game, i.e. joining one of the big four or you know, a bigger practice, etc., rather than being a sole practitioner, which is great, has its opportunities, but also has its challenges, I think, in terms of scale. So, no, as much as he loved us to be an accountant, we didn't follow down that line. That said, having lessons as I was at sort of pre-teen in reading a balance sheet was quite useful, you know, as a way of understanding the financials of reading a set of accounts, a P&L statement and a balance sheet, which anyone in business should really get to grips with in terms of understanding their business. It's effectively the standardized, normalized way of seeing things as they are in a business, not as you think they are.
It's one of the things I advise my customers on, like who might be struggling or even just not struggling, but trying to understand their business. Say to them, look, if you're looking at your P&L and your balance sheet regularly, like you're really going to understand, you know, constant reviewing rather than waiting to go see your accountant who's finalized it. Usually you're sitting down with them 3 months after they've finalized it. And you think, well, that's like a year and three months too late, or a year and 6 months too late. So it's like, you know, imagine going and see the accountant and he says, well, you know, in 2023, just to give you an update, you lost X%. And you're like, oh, so I agree with you there. Yeah.
It's akin to really having a map and you're driving from A to B. How are you going to be able to drive from A to B without a map? Obviously, you know, good kind of financial management, good financial control can only be done by understanding your management accounts, which, you know, there's no excuse with the advent of Xero and Sage and these cloud-based systems, which, you know, have these reports coming out at a click of a button. As long as the data is going in as clean as possible, then there's no excuse. Maybe an excuse in yesteryear, but now it's in the cloud. And, you know, we all need to do it, don't we? In terms of the statutory obligations of filing accounts. But actually, the meaningful aspect is doing it on a monthly or at least quarterly basis. And the most important of which is cash flow. Yeah,
cash flow is king. Absolutely. Yeah. A friend of mine, he's got a pie business in Warwick. And when I first started Ceres, he said to me, everything's great. Everyone's going to tell you this is great, that's great. Sales are great. He goes, but the fact is sales aren't great unless the invoice gets paid. He goes, and cash flow is the king. He goes, it's the lifeblood of any business. And he goes, and if the cash flow dries up, the business has a heart attack and dies. And I always remembered that. Like, I always remembered, like, because I think a lot of people were saying, oh, you're going to be a millionaire. Oh, you're going to do this. Oh, you're going to do that. And I thought, and he was the only person at the time that said to me, he actually brought it back down to like the reality. And he says, without cash flow, your business will die. And I was like, oh, okay. And and I think sometimes, because especially nowadays, it's worse actually. But because people look on social media and they see all these influencers as such, and they're saying, "Oh, I make £10 million in 1 month or whatever," and they just think, "Wow, if they can do it, I'm going to do what they do." And there's not enough real people out there that say, "Learn to read a balance sheet, learn to do this, learn your GPs." And I think that's really important, and it's so pivotal.
Yeah, I think, and you know what? In the advent of the internet and ChatGPT and all the rest of it, there's simply no excuse. YouTube videos. I mean,
Yeah,
the learning there, and it doesn't take a lot, and you don't need to be a maths wizard. I do think it's at the bedrock. In terms of valuation of business, it all revolves around cash flow.
absolutely.
I mean, in terms of when you come to either buy a business or to sell it, cash flow is really the anchor metric by which everything is measured by.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned ChatGPT. I was going to mention it later, but it's here. I've got a customer stroke friend of mine, and pretty much every week he gets all the data of all the platforms he's on, whether it's Just Eat, Delivery, you name it, his own walk-in data from his till system, and then he shoves it all into ChatGPT every week, pretty much. And he sends me the data all the time. We go through it, and he's like, look at this trend, look at that trend. And yeah, he's not acting on it immediately, but it's building up a pattern. You're not going to change your business plan every week, but it's looking at the pattern, and he says,
it's business intelligence, isn't it?
exactly. And he said, no, it's at my fingertips. Why would I not use it? And I think the answers are there. If we, like you say, if you're putting in the right data, there's no excuse today, really. You're right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting because you say cash flow is a really strong metric, but thinking of when people buy and sell shops years ago, I think you'll know this anyway. Your dad would definitely know this, but years ago, shops were sold on turnover pretty much, or especially chip shops. Any cash business was really sold on turnover. And I'm going to read between the lines, and that's because there was a lot of secret handshakes, and it was, well, I'd only care about the turnover because things are going to go awry, things are going to go missing from here to the treasury, Yeah. And whereas nowadays, obviously, that can't happen. But how can you factor in cash flow when selling a business, then, in your experience?
Well, I think it's about getting to the number through making certain adjustments. I mean, one rule of thumb, and we can talk in rule of thumbs and keep it quite non-technical.
Yeah.
And I think just going back to the point of valuation being done on takings, what was very convenient about that was very easy.
Yeah.
You can take literally last 12 months takings, and I'll say, well, I'm going to pay you 6 months of that, or 9 months, or even a year. And in fact, some practices are still sold as that. And it's nothing to do with obfuscating kind of numbers, which cash flow would obviously reveal. But I think the more kind of established methodology always involves cash flow, or free cash flow to be specific. Because ultimately, you've got to view the business that you're potentially buying or the business you're selling as an engine of cash flow. It's going to be someone else's cash flow. And you are effectively asking for money up front, which is going to be a crystallization of that cash flow based on typically a forward amount of time over which that cash flow will be generated. So most businesses will be looking at, really in the hospitality, catering, trade businesses, at best at tops 3 to 4 times of this cash flow. But what is that cash flow is what needs to be really looked at and worked out. And there's adjustments that can be legitimately added back to that cash flow. Obviously, your owner takings is the obvious one. You're not going to take that out the door. That's going to go back into the cash flow for the new owner to be the custodian of. So if you start looking at businesses almost like engines where the exhaust is the cash flow, what you're selling is that engine. And I say it as an engine because what you really want to do as a prospective owner of a business is make sure that the portability, transferability of that business is such that it's not reliant on you fully. Because ultimately, you can't be sold with the business. If you have a business where it is totally reliant on you, you're going to seriously hamper and dampen the value of the business. So you've got to find ways of extricating yourself out of the business in a way that the cash flow can start to be generated and to be seen distinct and apart from the owner themselves, which is really, really a difficult ask when you are selling a owner-based business, of course.
I was going to say, because I feel like at the moment, there's a few things. So anecdotally, there's a lot of small business. I don't know, you spend 5 minutes on Instagram or Facebook. There's loads of small businesses in everyone's local area, and they're punching through little videos. Look at us with our burgers, look at us with our fish and chips, whatever it is, and they're literally tying themselves further into that business. And I was wondering about this, like, are they in some ways like, let's say, I'm quite wary of this because on the road I'm linked to Ceres, but social media wise, I don't think I'm overly linked to Ceres. And I've got multiple hosts, and especially with the Ceres podcast. But then when you look at, like, let's say John's Burger, I've just made up a burger co. Yeah, but let's say he's scaled to £1 million a year. Now, if he goes to sell John's Burger, and actually, I tell you what's a better analogy: Spudman. Spudman has built a business based on his look and his name. Yeah. So if he decides to sell Spudman Co. for £1 million, well, Spudman now is gone. Someone can't caricature him and dress up like him. If I bought it and I gave myself a pink mohawk, it's probably a bit of a piss take, isn't it? So
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a challenge when you build on the cult of a personality, a particular business, because that is the business, or that's part of the branding of the business.
Yeah.
But ultimately, for Spudman, really, what really counts is the quality of your spuds, right? And the quality of your food produce. That's going to be the thing that ultimately matters in a business that's serving food or making food, manufacturing food, etc. It's going to be the quality of the product and the service, which stands distinct and apart from the individual and the cult of the individual. And that's a really serious point to make, because ultimately, at some point, you're going to want to sell your business, but you can't sell with it.
Yeah.
And you've got to find ways, mechanisms, and start thinking strategically of, what will that take? Well, that might take management, right? It might take someone else to be doing the day-to-day, which is ultimately going to be factored into the cash flow anyway.
Yeah.
If you have a replacement value for that owner. So you might as well front it up and also have a qualitative aspect to you running your business more from a strategic standpoint, rather than being in the trenches at the coalface. You're only one person, with one pair of eyes, one pair of hands, and only so much energy, etc. So scalability has to be thought through really, really early on. And I think that can apply to any aspect, any size of business. I mean, obviously, if you're a plumber or an electrician, you are the trade. And therefore, you're a tradesman, you're a worker in that regard. It's nigh impossible to sell a business like that, because you are the business. That said, I think a lot of businesses where you're providing products and services, you can build in subscription or other aspects of a business model that would allow a recurring revenues, really important, new channels to market that don't rely on you as the individual to actually sell your product. So you need to think through all these things.
A friend of mine bought a shop a few years ago, and he doesn't run the shop a lot. Actually, he gets in. It's a very good shop. He gets in the mornings, does his fish prep, does his fish cutting, checks everything, does his, let's say, stock takes, yield checks, and so on, and then he lets the staff get on with it. And we were making jokes one day, and I said, "Oh, you never work?" And he goes, "Stel." He was having a laugh with me, but he goes, "Stel," he goes, "The truth is," he goes, I bought a business, not a job." And it always made me think, like, he was the first person to sort of categorize it like that if you wanted to buy a job, he'd buy a quarter shop and he'd be there 5, 6, 7 days a week, whatever. But he bought a business. And for him, that means doing the higher level things, making sure that the stock's where they need it. He's got a management team that runs it. And I actually think that's probably where the Americans get it right really well. I think the Americans, they do build turnkey operations, whether it's a coffee shop, a cafe, whatever. They don't tend to always be, well, I'm sure there's some, I'm generalizing to some degree, but they do build systems very well.
And there's the key word, you mentioned it. You're building a system that isn't based on personality. And in effect, one of the best approaches is to almost treat your business like you're creating a franchise.
Yes.
Because effectively what a franchise is a system. It's a detachment of the personality from the business and putting things into distinct processes, standard operating procedures, obviously a distinct product range. It's tied down. It's very divorce from the personality.
Yeah.
And then for me, making a business run without you, making the business a business, not a job, is absolutely paramount. For actually having a sustainable life. So you can go on holiday and think of other things in your life and enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? Why else be in business, in my view? But B, when the time comes to sell, you have a very transferable asset. It's detached from you. And that will only increase the value of it,
Absolutely.
which will only be a better thing for you when the time comes, because eventually the time will come, as it inevitably does.
Yeah. Absolutely. There was a guy in our industry, you wouldn't have come across him from Derby, Nottinghamshire, and his name's Andrew Costantino, absolute genius. I think he was a genius. You'd sit down, you learn so much from him. And he had about 8 or 9 sites called George's Tradition. And I remember he was telling me a story about someone that was challenging how good he was as a fryer. Now, bear in mind, he's got 8 or 9 sites. He doesn't see himself as a fryer. He's a business person. Yeah. And he says to me, Stel, he goes, I sort of laughed and let the other person win the argument. He goes, but the fact is, he goes, I'd rather have a business that runs at 80%, 100% of the time, rather than a business that runs at 100%, 60% of the time. And I thought about that, my dad, he was one of those guys. I'm the best fryer I know. But he lived at the frying range. We didn't do anything on Sundays. He did nothing compared to what I do with my kids. And that's not that I'm a better father. It's just that I prioritize different things. But most first generation people will happily trade expertise for time all day long. I'll do 100 hours a week. I'm the best at this. And you're thinking, well, is that a comfortable life? And again, can you sell that business other than giving it to one of your kids or passing it on and down that line? It's not really going to help, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, I think, but then would you want your kids to have the life that you had?
Some would. Some.
maybe. Possibly a touchy subject. But yeah, I guess it's really what you want from life and what you want from your business. Yeah. Are you going to live to work or work to live? I mean, it goes back to that old cliche. And for me, obviously, building businesses for sale.com, it's software. It's about building processes. It's about building scalability right in front and center, which is one of the attractive aspects of running a cloud-based business as we do. And that's why they're quite appealing to a lot of entrepreneurs, because of that sense of subscription-based SaaS-type business models that can exist in the cloud, can work 24/7. I mean, there's a big attraction to passive income these days.
Yeah.
I think that's over-glorifying some of the things we're saying here, and not necessarily realistic either, for that matter. Because, ultimately, if you want a passive income, well, you can go and invest in the stock market in an ETF and take your chances with that, or an index tracker.
Yeah.
There are ways and means of doing that. You want to make your life interesting. You want a technical challenge. You want something that means that you are becoming expert at something, but doing it in a way that is sustainable, that isn't going to cause you stress, worries, sleepless nights, etc., and allow you to have freedom and enjoy the fruits of your hard work.
Absolutely. Talking about valuations is always something that confuses people. Like I mentioned earlier, how some people do it, and one of the ways I remember someone was doing it years ago, and I think my dad mentioned it to some degree. It was like, "Oh, we'll give 35,000 1,000." And that was a very simple way of saying we'll do 10 grand a week. That's 350k. And a friend of mine was saying to me recently that he prefers 2 times profit. So you get your yearly profit, and then you times it by 2, and then you find adjustments. And in every calculation, though, there's always going to be adjustments, and there's also how much does somebody want to pay for something. That is always the key.
Well, I mean, ultimately, a business is worth what someone is prepared to pay for it.
Yeah,
no doubt about that. But there are rules of thumb. There are yardsticks, and you touched upon your friend there that was saying 2 times profit. But then the question is, well, what do you mean by profit?
I think he meant net.
Okay. I mean, to my mind, the best and most accurate, and the one that really is the kingpin in the States, it's a multiple of SDE.
Okay.
To me, it's a form of adjusted EBITDA. It tries to get to that cash flow point.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, say, what the DCF tries to do, which is discounted cash flow, which you may have heard of, which is quite a technical process to get to understand what the net present value is, i.e. the value of something today, based on future cash flow, right? And what SDE tries to do is say, well, we're not going to look at necessarily the future, because the future is the future. We're going to look at recent past. So trailing 12 months, seller's discretionary earnings, which is effectively seller's discretionary cash flow, is looking at a adjusted EBITDA. Actually, how much cash is going to be in your pocket as that new owner? And how long would it take in terms of time for the cash that you would have outlaid as the new owner versus how much cash is coming through the door into the future based on that historical? So the 2 times isn't a million miles away from the kind of businesses that you're referring to in the catering, hospitality trades. People see, amazing deals getting done in the press all the time. And I think we all get a little wowed by that. Oh my God, let's look at YouTube. When that was sold back in 2006, it went for 1.4 billion, right? And it had no revenue. But of course, it was growing very fast, and Google had a business model that they could apply to YouTube in terms of monetizing video and video adverts, or adverts based on video. And to Google, it was worth 1.4 billion. In fact, it was a steal for Google. But that was Google.
Yeah.
So in some sense, that whole notion of a strategic buyer where it's more valuable for one buyer versus another can happen and does happen, even in relatively small businesses. But they are exceptionally rare, right? The lion's share of businesses being sold are roughly in that ballpark of 2 to 5 times adjusted profit around that seller's discretionary earnings.
Mm.
And that will be for most sales. I'd say, 90% and above, it will be in that kind of ballpark.
What's interesting is that in my mind, essentially, and lay me out if I'm wrong here, but I see businessesforsale.com as an ad agency, essentially. People put their product on there to sell.
It's effectively a classifieds marketplace, similar to what we remember in Friday Ad or Loop,
absolutely.
Those paper-based publications, Exchange and Mart. And what we are, of course, is specialists to businesses. So what we found in the advent of the internet, these kind of vertical marketplaces just doing exceptionally well for one particular thing. So obviously Rightmove is concerned with sales and lettings. We all know Rightmove. If you're selling a house, you want to get it on Rightmove. If you're looking to buy a house, you want to go use Rightmove. It's the most comprehensive aggregator of that type of content. Equally, cars with Auto Trader, Indeed.com for jobs. These are like the big classifieds. And the kind of what's really gone is, yes, you get the Gumtree to a certain extent, which is like a generic classifieds. But actually, for a marketplace to really function well, they have to be niche. They have to have a specialism. Our specialism with businesses for sale is, lo and behold, businesses for sale. So our search criteria, look at things like turnover, American Sport revenue, profitability through net profit. How long has the business been established? What's the management team look like? What's the complexion? So all these things that kind of have attributes and aspects pertaining to a business, we try and capture in our what we call the sell form, which is a way of the seller disclosing all aspects to their business. We're an open classified, similar to what Rightmove is. There's no hidden data as such. We don't get into the data room aspect of, when things go to due diligence and it gets a bit more specific in terms of understanding, getting under the skin of a business and understanding that business, which is absolutely critical when you're in the process of buying a business, that you really understand what you're buying. You want to really try and make sure all the skeletons fall out of the closet at the time. Otherwise, it's on you as the buyer. The risk is with you. So buyer beware. And most contracts are in that kind of representation in that way. There are ways of clawing back where things have been misrepresented, warranties and the like, but you really don't want those. You want to make sure that what you're buying is what you're buying. Otherwise, you walk. You should walk. No doubt about that.
It seems like you add a lot more value than just putting a site there for people to trade. It sounds like you've got a lot more knowledge that the whole company is putting forward there.
I mean, we have bought and sold businesses as a business. And so we've been through the process, and we do work very closely with the brokers because we introduce them unmandated businesses. So these are sellers that are yet to sign up for a particular broker or a particular channel, we will help and assist them. So we need to understand the business.
That's interesting, because most people would think that they're competition, whereas really you're not in bed with each other, but supportive of each other.
Yeah, we are facilitating.
Yeah.
And we do have services where it is self-serve, where a business owner can come online and literally advertise their business. But predominantly, we work with the brokers. Because the thing about selling a business is you as a seller are only going to do that once or twice in your life. It's a really rare experience. And because it is such a rare experience, you're not going to have all the wherewithal and the knowledge that you're going to need to make sure you get the best from the experience. You want to maximize, you want to get best bang for buck. For that, I totally advise you speak with advisors and brokers who do this day in, day out, week in, week out, because they've seen this and they're representing you. They want to get the best price for you. They're on your side. They're betting on your side, the seller's side. You do get buyer mandated brokers too, who are searching businesses on behalf of clients. But on the sell side, I really, really advise that you seek out the best names in the industry, of which we can help with that.
Yeah. I tell you, one of the things that strikes me, and I think it's really poor, to be honest, but when you see people that are self-selling it's mostly self-selling, the photos are shocking. Like, I'm not saying they should use a fancy DSLR. I don't mean the quality of the photo. I mean, the
subject
matter. The subject matter. So, like, no one's maybe changed the light bulb and the photo looks dark, or the floor looks dirty, or they've left like boxes on the floor that are shitty. And you think, like, you want to sell this thing. Like, if you were selling a car and I was coming to buy it, you'd give it a wash, you'd give it a hoover. And I think that most self-sellers of businesses don't seem to think like that.
Well, to be fair to them, I mean, we're not all born marketeers, and we do try and make advice to all, both, the professional as well as the self-seller as well, as to how best to represent your asset in the best possible light. But we're obviously not a photography course, there's a limit to that. But yeah, ultimately, you're not doing yourself any favors if you're not representing your asset in the best possible light, right?
Well, exactly, yeah.
The photos are absolutely critical in that. Even though we talk about cash flow, we talk about financials, and that's ultimately what you're buying as a business. But we still live in a physical world. And obviously, in terms of retail, there's a shop, or hospitality, there's a shop floor, there's an environment there with equipment, etc. So yeah, you're absolutely right. People don't help themselves fully. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I just think, for me, it's a no-brainer. Like, and I think the analogy of a used car makes complete sense to me, because you will hoover it out, you will clean the boot, you will give it a little polish, put a bit of air freshener in there. Yeah. If the opposite was true and you turned up and you saw a knackered-looking car, a bit dirty, stunk of fags, you'd be like, well, I don't really want to buy that. You're going to get lowballed, aren't you?
Well, you are, but equally as well, if a seller hasn't helped themselves by selling their asset, then the buyer could exploit that.
Yeah.
So you can actually get some real bargains too as a result of, it portrays a certain mindset. If a seller hasn't taken the time and effort to, get their asset perceived in a certain way, then there could be actually a bargain to be had. So you can almost flip it in terms of...
Oh, no, I definitely see that. The flip side for me is the fact that it now becomes a buyer's plus side, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah.
But from a seller's point of view, they've actually done themselves in. But to some degree, maybe, thinking broadly about it, if that's a problem for them, how to market themselves for sale, maybe that was a problem for them marketing for trading as well. Who knows? Broadly thinking. Yeah, it's interesting. The market that you're in is really interesting. I'm surprised to hear that you do work with sales agents, because I think in most industries, most people choose as, shall I sell myself or shall I go with an agent? Whereas what you're saying is go with an agent, because they're going to work with us anyway, and you've got the expertise.
Well, I think you ultimately could be in a better position to make more money. Even though you think you're saving money up front, you're kind of being penny wise but pound poor on that, in my view. That's not to say you don't get the occasional savvy private seller who really does know what they're doing, especially if they're serial entrepreneurs. You do find people that buy and sell businesses frequently. They're a minority, but they get it. And especially if you think about the tax benefits of of the disposal in terms of capital gains versus other forms of taxable income, it's actually an attractive way to make money in a tax efficient way.
For now.
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
For now, yeah, for now. I unfortunately would agree with that. Buying the right business at the right price is an absolute true investment gem. Because if you think about an asset like, say, a rental property, it might yield 3, 4, 5%, right? That's going to take 20 years to return. At 5%, that's 20 years return on investment, right? It's going to take 20 years to get the money back you paid up through the receipt of a yield, a stipend, or some sort of recurring income. A business being bought, say, 2 times, well, you're getting your money back in 2 years. And then everything is gravy after that. And not only that, if you've got energy, vim, and imagination and foresight to actually think, well, I can take an undervalued asset and know what to do, maybe renegotiate supply contracts, look at new markets that you can get your product into, new routes to market, etc. Once you've thought that through, you can suddenly start repaying yourself back less than that 2 years. There's not very many investments out there that can claim to be 50% return on investment, right? Effectively, that's what you can say.
I think one of the crazy things about I've seen, and maybe this is just, it's not always what I've seen, but it's one pattern of what I've seen, is that people buy a business and they're excited to buy the business, but then they become the person that had the business before. And I've often found that strange, because I'll give you a classic example. There was a chap that I'd known, and he'd been in the industry for 30 years. And he said when he started, he had lots of oomph, lots of vigor. He'd brought up his kids, built a nice little business. But then the last 5 years, he was a bit despondent, fed up. He wanted to get out. His kids had moved on. He wanted to enjoy life a bit more in personal life. But then the people that bought the shop didn't copy his initial oomph and thrust. Yeah. They copied his last 5 years of taking it, going slow. And I'm like, mate, you can't think like that. He'd paid off the mortgage. You ain't got that luxury. He'd done all of that. You now need to do all of that. You need to, he wouldn't have done this and he wouldn't have done that. And I was like, but you can't think like that. You've paid for this thing.
You're buying the option on the future.
Yeah.
As the new owner. And you need to have real discipline and thought into the strategic direction you want to take that business, because that's the wonderful thing about businesses. They are ultimately a reflection on the energy, effort, risk that you put into it. And I think there is a mentality for some business buyers to buy a business and say, well, what was tried and tested is tried and tested. And I ain't going to, change something that ain't broke. But business changes, appetites change, trends change, dynamics of the economy change all the time. It's a fluid world out there. So my advice is you buy the asset, let it bed in for 3 to 6 months. Don't do any knee-jerk changes. Don't do anything that's going to, dramatically revolutionize things and disrupt the apple cart, spook the horses, if you will. But during that time, really understand what everything is happening in that business to see where improvements can be made. Because as sure eggs as eggs, that assumption that improvements can be made will be the case.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And it's about injecting that energy, creativity, daring, risk. Because ultimately, that's the world of business. There needs to be an element of jeopardy and daring.
Absolutely.
To change the status quo. And that is actually a problem for business owners generally who've been in a business for a long time. You are who you are. And one of the advices I give to other business owners is make sure you take external advice. Helps get a fresh pair of eyes on the situation. And we have a non-exec director for our business. I think it's the best thing we can do. And we have other advisors on it, business coaches, mentors, people who've been in the industry that you're in, that you could be potentially buying in. Get to know them well.
Yeah.
Or have been in the industry and have proven themselves in an industry. Get to be their good friend Get them involved and make it a monetary. You'll get your money back in spades.
I agree, because you need someone to hold your feet to the fire. You need someone to keep, because when you're the business owner, let's say, well, you're at the top of the tree within that organization. So who then keeps you held to account? So it does make me wonder. Like, there was a story I was thinking about then, and then I've just lost it completely. But looking at the budget the other day, and I made a quick joke. Well, yesterday, and I made a quick joke about it. But a friend of mine texts me, because there's a lot of comments in the fish and chip groups and so on, saying, "Well, now that this has happened, I'm going to look at the efficiencies I can do." And it struck me that when we had a chat a few months ago, you're always saying to me, we've done this, we've made this change, we've made our business more efficient in this way. Efficient is not a bad word. And I think it's great, because you're cutting out fat all the time. And I don't mean good or bad people. I just mean you're making your processes better. And he made a good point, is that why is it that we wait for government to release a budget for us to then say, I'm going to now be efficient? In the nature of business, should we not always be looking like that?
Oh, well, 100%. And I think there's always a bit of tension, isn't there, between daring to change things, but also sitting back on our haunches to know what works. Change for change's sake is no good unless we know what it might mean. I mean, I do liken it in being in business and running businesses for sales, as I've done along with my brother for 26 years, which is quite incredible to even say that, in the way that we have been running it. In fact, I've been involved with it even longer when we go back to the magazine days and the like, when I helped set up the IT and desktop publishing as a student. But what I think is that, I mean, we hear about businesses needing to pivot, make real big changes because what they're working on isn't working very well. I think a lot of the time, what you need to do is just make sure, and it goes back to that business information point and business intelligence, you are reviewing, and preferably someone outside the business, how you are performing across the board of both sales and costs. And it likens to me, an analogy is sometimes it doesn't actually take too much of a tweak to make something gel in the way that you'd hope it would gel. It's similar to getting a camera into focus. It doesn't actually take that much in the old-fashioned way of getting something into focus with a lens to actually get something from blurry to crystal clear. I think that can happen in business quite regularly and quite a lot. So a lot of the time is you need to try and see things with a fresh pair of eyes as often as possible. And that's really difficult as a human. And I can only advise that getting external pair of eyes will help do that.
Yeah.
And make your a better business.
Absolutely. And I think, talking of pivot, we see it a lot in our industry where people are like, oh, you need to add more things to your menu, do this, do that. And if that's their business case, if that's what the data shows, they should probably do it. But I often look at, how about you hyper-focus into becoming a specialist in what you do rather than adding lots of different additions. So, and I think there's, you can pivot both ways. You decide which way you want to go. And I like the idea of becoming hyper-focused and making the best, whatever it is. If it's burgers. If it's fish and chips, it's fish and chips. It could be popcorn. It doesn't matter. Just focus on it, hyper-focus, and be the best at what you do. And also, there's the added benefit that it actually helps with cash flow, because if you've not got 19,000 products in the storeroom that you're holding, that is a big help too. And I think it's interesting, because I think all of these good business practices really tie back around into each other. Yeah. So we've discussed valuations, which is great. One thing that's interesting though, and I think you mentioned Jeff Bezos earlier, but you guys went through the .com thing, and obviously you went through COVID too. But what was that like, the .com boom? Because that scared and obviously sent a lot of businesses pop, but you guys made it through.
Yeah. In fact, I think we're still one of the few businesses that were part of that .com bubble of the late 90s, early 2000s that's still functioning and running as it originally set out to do. So it was an interesting experience, the exuberance of .com. This internet arrived on the scene, and it was going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And investors all rushed in, as investors do, wanting to not miss the train on it. And they all piled in. And when people realized, this was not materializing in the way they anticipated or hoped, they wanted their money out. And that effectively was the bubble. So money rushes in. There's no return on that investment. It's effectively stock market exuberance, and then the bubble pops. Similar to what we're seeing with AI now, I think, and have done since, over the decades since the original dot-com bubble. There's been other bubbles that have emerged. Crypto was another one, of course, and blockchain. So living through that was very, very interesting because, me and my brother, we really believed in the mission of what we were doing, in the medium in which we were doing it. And we all also knew that it's going to take a lot longer than what the market expected, because sometimes change just takes a long time. You've got to change consumer behavior. You've got to change the paradigm in which people were traditionally buying and selling things in the context of businesses for sale. So we still had an incumbent media. And I think what happened with the dot-com bubble was that there was an over-expectation in the short term, which actually was at the expense of an under-expectation in the long term, I think. So actually what really came apparent, and what were the two big game-changing things along the way that really helped our business speed along, was the advent of broadband. So when we started the business, it was dial-up. It was crazy. And, even in this country, it was dial-up, which actually cost money. It became free eventually, like in the US. But our business, when we started, when we opened the doors, we got most of our business from the US, believe it or not, because they were so further down the line in adopting new tech. So we lived through the dot-com bubble. We became cash flow positive after about 3.5 years. So in the early 2000s, as a business, we became a credible business around 2003, having properly launched as a full-scale dot-com only business in the late 90s. It took about 3.5 years before our proposition straight, but we had to formulate our proposition. The whole conception of freemium didn't exist. This idea that you can build land grab by giving away your service, getting the adoption, then stepping back and then working out where you can carve out the value in the premium and then start monetizing. That model didn't exist. We didn't have someone like Rightmove to borrow from to understand how a classifieds business model would work for that kind of marketplace. So we had to do a lot of praying and a lot of hard work. But once we got established and understood the dynamics of what we were working with, and again, you've got to credit good business intelligence to that, and doing a lot of A/B testing, trying one thing, dropping it, fail fast, fail early. We were kind of early adopters of that methodology. Again, we had to kind of work out, well, where does the value sit, and how can we extract that value? So quite a lot of that kind of hand on the lens and tweaking. We didn't have to do any major pivots, thankfully. Yeah, so the two big things that really happened that really speed along all internet adoption, probably three actually, was, I think, broadband, the advent of mobile, effectively put the power of a PC in the palm of everybody's hand, which then had its challenges in terms of getting ready for that. And then to actually put COVID up there, because you probably saw that in the food industry, people suddenly became very comfortable using apps and using the web to get stuff done because there was no alternative. So that really did put the fast forward button down and just sped us along in terms of adoption. So the ideas that were going on in the late 90s, they weren't bad ideas. It's just they didn't have enough cash to see them through.
Yeah.
Someone like Amazon did, and they burnt through billions and billions and billions before they became a credible business. I mean, it took decades, actually, before it got into the black. But it obviously changed shopping forever, right?
I think you're right. A lot of people look at them now and don't realise that for about, 17 years, 18 years, they didn't make a profit. It was just throwing money back in and getting more money off investors.
Building the infrastructure, building the relationships, and actually biding time for consumer behaviour to change.
Yeah, and I guess, and also changing consumer behaviour.
Yeah, and forcing that change.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think, now you see them everywhere. You see the vans everywhere. You see warehouses everywhere. But I think where they have been very clever as a business is building that infrastructure and owning it. One thing I've seen a lot lately, which is probably annoying to some degree, I would imagine, is lots of Facebook groups and people selling businesses on Facebook groups. But one thing I see a lot of is comments under it saying, oh, send me a message. And then it's all of this, oh, what a time waster. And this is a time waster. And I just think, yes, it's free and or at least it's relatively low friction. But actually, it's so low friction that annoying people bother you. And I thought I wouldn't ever want to sell a business through Facebook Marketplace. It's not, it's not a crappy old rower that I've got sitting there.
No, it seems a bit too open, doesn't it? And a bit low rent in its approach. I mean, it might work for certain products. I think an area for businesses, there's a confidentiality aspect to it as well. And what we're introducing are kind of, again, business specific needs need to be addressed for that particular marketplace, which Facebook Marketplace would never be able to customize and to capture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you literally could be selling a lamp, or you could be selling, a 300,000, 400, 500,000 pound business. It doesn't add up. You need certain attributes of data, information, behaviors, search filters, etc., which are targeted for a particular industry. And I've put jobs into that, and I've put houses into that, and I've put cars into that. So I don't think we're going to see Rightmove being displaced anytime soon because of Facebook Marketplace. And I think, thankfully, that could apply to us too.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think, to be fair, most of the businesses that I see in these groups that are for sale, it usually seems to be like it's been closed for a while and they've got zero value. So I guess that's why they're just shoving it there, because they think, well, if it goes, it goes. And if
yes, that's right. It's probably an asset sale, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's another one that was interesting. I was chatting to someone the other day, and he said a few years ago, well, let's say 90s onwards, people would buy something like a chip shop or a coffee shop or something like that, and they'd work it themselves, like we said earlier. So they'd buy a job essentially, and they were happily doing that because there was some informal upside. Let's say they're working all the hours, they're hoovering all that in. Now, though, because there's less of the informal upside, you're seeing people trading that for something like, let's say, a coffee franchise or a pizza franchise, because what we went back to earlier, there's systems and they don't have to be there all the time. You guys are involved a lot with franchises.
Yeah.
Do you see that as a big part? Is that growing in the UK? Because I think that is a very American thing, franchises. I'm not saying we're not that far behind, but we're not as ahead as America, are we?
No, we're not. I mean, America invented the whole concept of franchising. There's a fantastic book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth.
I like that book. Yeah, good book.
Which is all about, even if you're not building a franchise, build your business like you are building a franchise, which is an echo of what we've discussed. I think there's been a sea change in attitude. There's a kind of a snobbery against franchising over the years, if I can say that. And I think that's gone. People suddenly realised that actually a good franchise is a cash-flowing, good business. Right location, selling the right products to the right audience. And you, as the franchisee, don't have to get involved with any of the R&D, any of the marketing, product decisions, etc. You're plugging in capital, time, energy, and you should get a pretty safe bet of return on that investment, on that cash flow, because you're leveraging that wider system. You effectively got a big brother on your side as the entrepreneur. I think what is become really apparent, which kind of signifies the growing up of this whole industry, is seeing the multi-unit owner who can have quite a number of these units, each cash flowing and contributing to a whole co. And that to me is, true entrepreneurship, acting almost like a mini private equity outfit, being able to roll up lots of similar franchises, maybe get centralization of costs through being able to centralize relationships with your suppliers because you have multiple units. So, I came across a young chap, and he was young, still late 20s, who had 4 gym franchises. And he's not there working the shop floor in any of those 4. He's costed it as such that effectively he's able to have a whole co that is streaming, hundreds and hundreds of thousands profit every year. So it's still sub 1 million, but he's knocking on the door of 7 figures.
Wow.
And you start to think, wow, you've built that dream idea of leveraging someone else's IP and costed it in such a way and funded it in such a way. And remember, with funding, as long as the banks are kept happy with your debt service cover ratio, having a healthy enough amount of cash flow left after paying their dues, they will support you, especially if you've proven yourself. So this young man being able to get his 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th franchise is going to be a heck of a lot easier than it was to get his 2nd, 3rd, or 4th because of that provability and de-risking because of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think franchises are a credible, serious route to entrepreneurship now. And I think that the kind of glamour of striking out and creating your own business isn't as glamorous if it involves too much risk. That can be de-risked because you can buy a franchise.
Yeah, there's a guy on X that I follow, and this is how the Americans think differently to the British anyway. But like in Britain, I think there is still a snobbery against franchising to some degree. Oh, you chose a franchise. Oh, you didn't do your own business. And I think maybe that was America 20, 30 years ago. And I think America, again, it's always just proves the way. But there's this guy that I follow on X, and he owns 6 or 7 Little Caesars, 4 or 5 Chick-fil-A's, and 4 or 5 Taco Bells. He's probably a bit older than me, so he's not old. And you think, like, there's no brand loyalty. And well, it probably is now, but then there wasn't. He's probably thinking it's a great business, solid business. I can make X return. I'll work it hard. And then over here, I remember a chap that I know, he had a Subway franchise, and they basically said to him, our goal for you and us is that you grow into a multi-site franchise owner.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was like, yeah, of course, signs the contract. And then 2 years down the line, they come to him and say, look, someone's asked to open a site literally a mile away. You've got first refusal. We want you to do it, but we're not going to stop him from doing it if you don't do it.
Yeah.
And then
they do. I mean, franchisors prefer multi-unit.
Yeah.
It's simpler. You're relating to one person rather than 5 or 6.
Yeah.
In the same principle as a bank liking
absolutely
one borrower, because it's an easier relationship to manage.
Yeah.
It's a scale relationship ultimately, and the benefit of scale.
In the end, the Subway operations people basically let the other guy come in. The other guy wasn't pushing along, and they took his franchise off him. And I think that if you jump on board, and a friend of mine owns quite a few McDonald's franchises. I'm quite friendly with her. She has about 22 sites now. And
Wow.
and she says these McDonald's franchises are like the cream of the cream, though. They're very expensive.
They are.
But she says, like, you know, you've really got to sort of put faith in McDonald's, and they put faith in you being on the ground. But if you don't listen to what they're telling you, they'll really get you. You'll get short thrift. And she said, but she knows where people have paid good money, let's say 3 million, 2 to 3 million for a site, done all the training, and then the location has flopped, massively flopped. You know, but McDonald's corporate send an emergency team and they work with you and you do everything they say. And she goes, if you do that, they actually help you get another site that works. They'll put you into a site that works because they see that you went through the bad times with them. And I think that's so vital that they do something like that. I thought that was really,
That's a really interesting narrative there, Stelios. No doubt about it. I mean, that's probably an explanation as to why McDonald's is what it is. And I think good, responsible franchisors do act like that.
Yeah,
it's not just take the money and run. There's a reciprocity, a sort of bidirectionality in the relationship. And I think as a prospective franchisee, you really want to look at that in terms of the training and support you get if things don't go to plan, which in business is more than likely going to be the case.
Yeah.
Franchise or not, although I would say, one of the most de-risked asset you can go out and buy is a franchise resale that has proven track record in a given market. It's probably at the top of the tree of, lowest risk, highest reward, because you're going to have the whole business ready to go. You're literally just plugging in capital and you're getting that return of capital pretty much from day one. And that probably is, if I was to have my time again, building a holdco, buying up safe franchise resales as a route to entrepreneurship, as a speedy route to entrepreneurship, wouldn't be a bad way to go at all.
Yeah. No, I think you could be right. If you worked hard in a certain job for 5-10 years, got the seed money to then go do your first one and then just keep plowing straight through it. I think you're right. I think if you really supercharge the good things that they were offering you with your ingenuity and hard work, then why wouldn't you? But I do think that's also the case with a lot of business. I say this to a lot of business owners, like, a lot of fish and chip shop owners that I deal with. I'll say to them, one bit of advice I give them is, if you're opening a shop from scratch, treat it like a runway that has a very short runway, and you need to take off as fast as you can. Your job is to get that plane in the air. And by that, what I'm essentially saying is, go hard, go fast. You're not going to do this every day. Some people will open lots of sites, but for the most part, most people just have one fish and chip shop. So if you're going into it and you're treating it like a retired person buying a B&B, this is not the job for you. Like, actually, and I say that to a lot of people, maybe if that's what you want, go get a B&B like a retired person, because that is a completely different pace. Whereas fast food, food retail, whatever you call it, there is so much competition now. If you're going to get into it and just sort of dilly-dally, you're going to really struggle, I think. I think you need to be hot on it, hot on your heels. And I think, again, this is where you look to the Americans and you think, they work on smaller numbers. They're based, as in single items. They work on long-term volumes. They want volume. And I think, whereas over here, we've probably sat back a bit and thought, no, we want higher numbers per order and less volume. And I think, that doesn't work so well. I think you've really got to push forward.
Yeah, and of course, America's got the benefit of being, in terms of just population, and then also the economy is disproportionately bigger as well. I mean, they either go big or go home, don't they?
And also, if it's food business, they also consume 3 times the calories than a British person anyway. So.
But I mean, I think understanding, that some of these holdcos now in franchise ownership, or like unit ownerships, are actually bigger in terms of value than the actual franchise that they're owning units of.
Yeah,
and that's the crazy kind of place we've got to now in terms of rolling up, and the financing behind that, relatively cheap credit to keep buying up sites. And I think that culture in America is, like I said, the market is so much bigger. It's easier to do, but not impossible. I mean, I do know, tens and tens of units being owned by single owners, even in the UK.
Yeah.
So it can happen.
A good friend of mine, 2 good friends actually, the brothers and a dad, they took on the Northern Territory franchise agreement for Wendy's. And they're from Mansfield initially, but now they live up that neck of the woods where they are. And they're called the Pappers Group. They've got fish and chip shops and they've got the Wendy's, and they're doing really well. Like, and you think, from what I can tell, they're doing really well. I haven't spoken to them for a while because, again, they are all in. Like, these guys, they are ultra focused. Like, they don't pick up the phone to talk about crap when they've got things to be doing, and they're just hyper focused. And I said, so how long can you carry on like that? And he goes, until the job's done. Like, we've got jobs to do, because I think now they've thrown themselves into they've bought some Wetherspoons franchises as well, and they're one of the first to get the Wetherspoons franchises, so which is quite amazing. But moving on a little bit, what did you think to yesterday's budget?
Well, it wasn't a great surprise. I mean, we've had so much rumour. The rumour mill's been in overdrive, and they've been almost, as they say, rolling the pitch and getting us prepared for a lot of what was discussed yesterday. I just think it's just possibly a death by 1,000 cuts of smaller taxes. There was some elements in there changing, extending EIS and EMI to kind of foster more investment, but they were really buried. You have to really dig deep to actually see through the noise of where the tax was coming from. So I do think the culture of growth and investment is not endemic in this government at all. And it's what we actually need as a country, is rewarding risk. Where's the jeopardy? Building a business is a risky enterprise, so you need to make it worthwhile for someone to get up and go. And without that kind of injection of de-risking, because the government has allowed that de-risking to happen, it's really difficult to get the growth we're going to need as a country, and that we cannot tax our way to growth. So it's really disappointing. I get it, we got a big black hole to fill, not necessarily the making of this government. It's a continuation of previous governments. So, she can't be blamed for the hand she's been dealt, because she's relatively new to it. But I would have liked to have seen a bit more daring, a little more of the entrepreneurial spirit and reward to the entrepreneur. So we've seen the back of entrepreneurs tax relief. Now it's called BADRs, and it's getting less and less every year. So the risk and the jeopardy associated with entrepreneurship is becoming more and more costly.
Yeah.
And people are saying, why bother? And I think a lot of the entrepreneurs are simply leaving.
Yeah.
And they're leaving the UK, which is really awful.
I was reading the other day that the two countries that most rich people or entrepreneurs are going to is Dubai and Cyprus. And I was shocked by Cyprus. Well, I'm not so shocked, actually, because...
Well, they reward entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
and their tax structure is such that, they open the door to the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They appreciate that they're going to grow wealth, which will then cascade and trickle down into the rest of society. And ultimately, guess what? Into more taxes.
Yeah.
So, I am quite surprised by Cyprus and not either. And Cyprus, which is ironic, isn't it? I do see it a lot being mentioned.
Would you remember Cyprus when you was a kid? That's probably why I was slightly shocked. Although I was there twice this year, it is not the same Cyprus anymore. Cyprus, when we were kids, there was barely roads. So well done to them.
It was very good with potatoes back then and holidays.
Oh, they're still good for potatoes and holidays.
Potatoes and holidays. But we've grown up since then. Financial services have become a big thing, and I think that's it's a kind of knowledge infrastructure piece, which I don't know how that came about. Maybe we as a people talking about our Cypriot cousins have that sense of financial kind of knowledge and competence has now led into industry, which then has made it really appealing for people to migrate there. I don't know, but we need some of that in this country, and we need it now. And I think the last time we had it was with Gordon Brown. What he did with entrepreneurs tax relief was fantastic. EIS, SEIS, and these kind of schemes for tax deducted incentives to put money into new ideas, into new things, because we are in a global race, and we kind of, I thought, got that during the Cameron years, but it's been totally lost. And we went through austerity, and then it's been one thing after the other. Brexit, COVID, Ukraine, it's just been added.
Yeah.
Pressure and stress. So I do worry about where we go to next and how it plays out in this country. Why in the States, what's really interesting, they have something called the SBA loan system. Have you come across that?
No, never.
Basically a government-backed loaning system for business acquisition and actually working capital and investment as well. So what effectively is similar to what we did in COVID in this country, where effectively you had government-backed loans that were on relatively preferential terms, where the government underwrites the risk for banks to actually loan to people to do business. And business acquisition is an area where these SBA loan systems do. So they've had this for like 50 years, and it's not like a recent thing. And it may be one of the reasons why the American economy is disproportionately so much bigger than ours.
Yeah.
And indeed Europe even. And I think they're kind of galloping ahead with GDP growth and all the rest of it, because they have systems like this in place where they effectively back risk. They back risk, and they want reward for that risk that everyone can share in, including ultimately taxes downstream, because you've built businesses that are working in a global world, a global race. So there's a few things we could be doing better, and there was absolutely nothing in that direction yesterday.
No. And look, I'm convinced that even if the situation wasn't as bad as what it is before, this government would have done exactly similar things. Maybe I feel like this is the type of government they are, like you mentioned. And I don't think that's a left or right issue. I think Gordon Brown, like you said, he was a left-leaning prime minister and chancellor. So he did those things. I think this is just the way these are. They keep talking about fairness and equality. And that's all nice, don't get me wrong. But, when you're taxing the wealthier, when you're taxing, and again, I'm not anti-wealth, like, I'm not being funny. If you do have a £10 million in Knightsbridge, £7,500 council tax is nothing to someone like that. I mean, I'd be shocked if they even recognise it on a bill somewhere, because they've probably got people that are dealing with their costs at that level. Yeah, I'm guessing. I don't know. I'm guessing, but I'm not that rich, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But but when you feel like when you're paying tax from £12,000 and then you're on minimum wage, you're probably destined to be on minimum wage for all your life, and that's what they don't see, is that by putting people in that position, they're actually harming the people, the aspirational people that are trying to move up. And, Elon Musk, I was reading a book by Walter Isaacson about Elon Musk, and he was talking about a guy that went to work with him at, was it Starlink? I think it might have been Starlink. Oh, no, SpaceX. It was SpaceX, actually. And the guy said, "I'll come if you put me 2 years guaranteed in escrow." Yeah. And then when they got the company going, the chap was not overly happy because he wasn't getting any bonus structure. And he goes, "Yeah, but I've put 2 years in escrow for you. Like, there's no risk for you.
What you wanted,
you wanted that. And if we go bust, you've still got your 2 years wages. We don't. We're going to
forfeited the future for something present and now.
Yeah.
So you can't have both.
No,
I think that's the lesson there.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And Elon Musk understands taking a risk and
just a bit
changing the destiny of humanity by putting his money where his mouth is.
He probably doesn't know what it's like to not take a risk. He's the opposite way around.
Yeah.
But and then always, one thing that intrigues me about Cyprus is the bail-in. I remember when that happened and everyone was screaming from the rooftops. But now look at their financial position. Like they've really come out of it doing better. And just yesterday after the budget, a lot of people in our industry always talking about lower VAT. And someone said to me, "We need to be like Ireland. Ireland has VAT on hospitality at 12%, and it's been reduced to 9% for a little while." But you think yes, their economy's smaller, but they get so much money from finance and technology and medical. Yeah. And then you've got the fact that they just got that however many billion from Apple. And then you consider that their debt is 30% of GDP and ours is 100%. No, maybe not on GDP, but it's 30% and 100% over here. We've got no wiggle room in the UK. We really don't. We might be a bigger economy, but we're really up against it.
Oh, we really are. We really are, unfortunately. And going back to Gordon Brown and what he did with the film industry, the tax credits there to incentivize companies to come in from abroad, because ultimately that's what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a globe that is very interconnected, and entrepreneurs will take their choices. If they think they can get a better reward for their risk over there, they're going to move over there, and they do.
Yeah. Well, because they can. They're very mobile, aren't they? Yeah.
And actually, up until quite recently, historically speaking, the UK was fantastic for that. It genuinely was. It was a meritocratic, dynamic, good society, good, strong rule of law. People were civil enough to each other, and maybe that's the heritage of cricket, and and being able to queue properly and all the rest of it. But we need to get back to that, and we need leaders that are going to inspire that. And that's the other thing I don't think we've had lately, or that kind of leader that can kind of bring a country together, that's going to get us back on track and be motivated. And we're getting drawn into some really ugly arguments over immigration and the like, and it's only going to continue, I feel.
I have an unpopular opinion, and I think that person was Rishi Sunak. I think that if he had more time, so let's say he had the time that we're all messing around when Liz Truss was doing what she was doing, if he got in then, I wonder if we would have just had enough time to get things back on course slightly.
I think that's an interesting point. I think he was the right man at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's a very good, that's a better point. Yeah, that's a lot better point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and talking of films, actually, I was watching a film once and it was based in LA, and turned out it was filmed in Birmingham. And I was so shocked. And
that's Gordon Brown's tax credits.
Yeah.
Because of the the restrictions on how to film and where to film and the like, and that would have brought in money, would have employed people to do the job, the cast and the crew, etc., all to come from the UK. We need those kind of incentives again.
See, so now people might be thinking, why are these two guys talking about films? But you know a thing or two about films. Both you and your brother are very artistic for a start, but you also are I don't know, would you strictly say you're a filmmaker? You're probably more...
No, I think Marcus, my brother.
He's a
So Marcus is
filmmaker.
chairman at businessesforsale.com, co-founder, very much in the business. But, there's an example of someone that's been able to detach himself from the day-to-day of the business that would allow him to go off and make a film, which he did with Papadopoulos and Sons, which is one of the films he's made. He's made others besides that too. That's one of his more famous ones. And I'm more in the business day to day. However, I do take a very keen interest with...
You sounded like my brother then. When I was coming off to do this business, you sounded just like my brother then. It was very much like, looking at what another brother does and says, yeah, he's going away while I'm running the proper business.
No, it's not. That's unfair. He is very much front and center in the business too, on the day to day. He's just been able to in a disciplined manner, be able to divorce his life so that he has alternate streams of existence, which is full credit to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got an interesting story about that film, though. Did you know that I did a very, very, very minor bit of consulting for that film?
I did. I was aware of that. Did you get the credit?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Well, I'll have to work that out, Stelios.
It was
your name should be there in lights. If not, then we may need to do a post-production edit and get you in there.
Maybe they should put it right next to Stephen Delane. Maybe they put it right there. But no, honestly, I was there for 3 days. Where was it? Morden. It was in Morden.
Yes, it would have been Morden.
Yeah. It was summer. It was August. I was sat outside for 3 days. I remember it. And everyone was really nice. And they were like... And my job, and Marcus said to me, we just need someone that knows the fish and chip industry to help us get this scene right. And I was like, great, I'm your guy. And I'm thinking, you got all these images of what it's like to be on a film set.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, it couldn't be any further from the truth of what you think a film set is like is nothing like what you imagine a film set to be like. I was on set for those 3 days, bored off my brain, hotspotting off my laptop, sitting outside for 3 days. And then they're like, Stelios? Where's the chip shop guy? And I'm like, oh, here's my moment. I walk in. And I think it was George Corafacci, the brother of the film.
Yeah.
And he's like, am I whisking this right? And I look at him, I'm like, yeah. He goes, great, we can carry on. And I was like, oh my God. And if I'm right, I didn't even invoice you, brother. I felt so bad. I can't remember, to be honest. I just felt so bad that I'd done nothing for 3 days.
Come on. But brilliant. I remember Marcus saying this much. It's like you're making a film about fish and chip shops, then having an essence of someone that's actually done it at the coalface is absolutely imperative. But yeah, what a great experience for him and the team. It's fantastic. Anybody
listening to this should watch it, whether you're Cypriot or whether you're in fish and chips. It's just a great film anyway.
It's on BBC iPlayer. Just type Papa and it comes up.
That's it. Just need Papa. Yeah. But sounds like when I tell people my last name, just THEO. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, but no, mate, it's been a great conversation. Before we finish though, is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't ask, do you think? Is there anything that's going on at the moment that maybe is really important?
Well, I think there's never been a better time to buy a business. For me, the whole idea of buying a business is not the preserve of someone that's got lots and lots of money. You can find financing for this if you have the right experience. Yes, you might need some down payment, you might need some equity, but actually as a route to wealth, I like to see it like a time machine. You're buying someone else's sweat, blood and tears and energy that's may have taken years, decades to get to a point, and you can buy that up front. That to me is like a time machine. You can start from that point with your own youth, your own vigor, your own ideas, and then take it further still. So yeah, I would not discount buying a business or a franchise as a way of getting to wealth quickly.
Well, on that note, that's what everyone needs to do. Find a business that you want, find a franchise that you want, and get stuck in. Give it 110%. Like I say, treat it like a plane on a very short runway. Give it everything you've got. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time today, Andrew.
Very welcome, Stelios. Really enjoyed it. All the best.
That's it for this episode. Huge thanks to Andrew from businessesforsale.com. Even if you're not planning to sell, their site is absolutely packed full of great content for all business owners. So jump over there, learn what you can, soak it all in. There is so much to take in from that website. Thank you to Andrew and thank you to Marcus plenty too. Before you go, quick reminders. Go and look at the Ceres Calculators for free on the Ceres website. Check out our blog for daily updates on margins, cost, loyalty, energy, and all the news. Thank you for listening. Keep your pans hot, your margins sharp, and I'll see you next time on the Ceres podcast.